Hello everybody, welcome back to Screenstars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2022 Western Terror on the Prairie, a film that is directed by Michael Polish and it stars Gina Carano, Nick Searcy and Donald Cerrone. Now the film focuses on Gina Carano's character Hattie, who is living in the Old West with her husband and children. They have relocated to like this cabin to kind of make a life for themselves on the prairie. It's a tough life. She's not enjoying it. She's really struggling. And it sets a few years after like the Civil War. So there's quite a lot of unrest still. And then her husband, Jeb, heads off into town to get some supplies, and she's visited by a gang of outlaws who initially are quite polite. She realises something is wrong and she has to go into survival mode to protect her children and her husband. Right, what are my thoughts on Terror on the Prairie? Well, this is of a good quality Western, and what I mean by that is it's not like, super high budgeted or anything, but it's got some really strong production values here, and the film for me absolutely looked the part. There's some very nice cinematography going on. It looks gritty. It looks like a place you wouldn't want to live, and it kind of almost, to some degree, feels like it's an accurate portrayal of the West in many ways. It's not like some westerns that you watch, they feel glossed over almost, and they feel like a fantasy, like a Western fantasy. This certainly doesn't. It doesn't feel like some place you'd want to be, sort of thing. It does look tough, a tough place to live. Gina Carano, regardless of what you might think of Gina Carano, in the past, the only real issue I've had with Gina Carano is essentially her acting ability. She's got a lot of screen presence, of course she does, but generally speaking, her acting has kind of come up a little bit short. For me, this is by far her best performance. And not that I know everything that she's ever done or watched everything she's ever done, but this I think is a really good performance by Gina Carano. And the reason why I think it really works for her is it's a different role for her. Now, when I knew that Gina Carano was in this film, I had this thing in my head as I was going to expect in this film: Gina Carano kicking ass, basically. And while you do get that to some degree, not in the way you might think. She's not running around, putting chokeholds on people and knocking them through windows and being a real tough character in that sense. She's playing a normal woman who is trying desperately to protect her family. And one of the biggest compliments I can really give her in regards to her performance here is, physically, it didn't need to be her in the role. You could have cast another actress in this role. And it had nothing to do with the physicality is what I'm trying to say, and it was more about her performance in regards to being vulnerable. And you definitely felt like she felt like a vulnerable character trying desperately to keep her and her family alive. So it was a good role for her, and I thought she did very well. Another thing I really thought was very good about this film is the villains, the bad guys. For me, the best villains in films, or certainly villain, and there's the head villain here is a guy called the Captain, who is seeking vengeance for the death of his daughter some years previously in the war. And he's hunting down those that he deems responsible for her death, which is why it leads him to Gina Carano's home, sort of thing. And I'm not going to say why or speak any further on that, but in his mind, and this character does some truly despicable and grotesque things, and he's clearly a villain, in his mind he's completely justified in what he's doing because he's trying to seek vengeance for the death of his daughter. So it treads very heavily, this film, in the grey area. Yes, the villains are very clearly villains, but not like mustache twirling villains. There's a little bit more complexity to them, which I very much appreciated. So the film itself is, you've got like the initial setup, the introduction of the villains first, and then Gina Carano and her family, and it focuses on them then, and the tough life that they're living, and the fact that she's really struggling with it all. So you get all that set up, you get a nice introduction to all the characters, you know who's who. It doesn't really need to go any further than that. The film doesn't complicate itself with other plot lines that it doesn't need. It just focuses solely on this siege initially of when these outlaws turn up and they lay siege to this house. And again, I mean, another thing I thought the film did well, initially when they first turn up at the house, they're very polite. She even invites them in and offers them to make them something to eat. And then you can feel the conflict rising as she discovers more and more about them, sort of thing. And I thought that was handled really nicely. They didn't just turn up, we're the bad guys, bang bang, shoot shoot, all this kind of stuff. It slowly built up until the penny dropped with her that something just wasn't right with these characters. So I liked how they did it. It was deliberately slow paced at times, the film. But when it needed to give us some action or give us some thrilling shootouts, it certainly showed its hand and did that too. And they were all filmed adequately. Don't get me wrong, it's not gunfight the OK Corral type stuff here. It's not like really slick shootouts with really skilled fighters and this kind of stuff. It's not what you can imagine is Gina Carano is not very skilled with a rifle. That's also made fairly clear early on, but she will do anything to protect her family. I'll be honest, as westerns go, this is actually quite a good one. I did generally really enjoy it. I was engaged throughout. I enjoyed what I saw. It was well made, well acted, with some good action. So I'm going to give this one a solid 7 out of 10. A pretty decent western if you guys out there are into that sort of thing. So I hope you enjoyed this review. Thank you very much for watching. And of course, I'll be back with more reviews and content on the channel very, very soon.